started out very attractive to people because it was a small community of geeks who really liked the 80s and 80s sounds. It was on MySpace. You know, this was maybe 10 years ago. You'd have people on MySpace just creating music that kind of sounded like Jan Hammer, or that sounded like, you know, like New Order, or that sounded like, you know, whatever. It was a very tight-knit, friendly community. And I think now, as it's getting bigger, I think people are thinking about their childhood, or people are thinking about, you know, a different time. It's a thing that's become timeless. It's like you have the 80s, you have Ghostbusters, all this stuff is still on. We're 20 years into 80s nostalgia in different ways. At this point now, what used to be a tight-knit community and what attracted people is now become something as more of a collective experience. The people who start movements, they're not necessarily anticipating what will happen. If they were, then I think that would actually perhaps cause the movements to not actually happen. I think what some of these pioneers of synthwave were doing was they were just making music that they loved and that they wanted to share, and that reminded them of, you know, their childhood in the 80s, or, you know, whatever their influences may be. Maybe they were just trying to make a good songs. What happens with that is, if that becomes successful, then you look around and you're like, oh wow, what have I done? What have I contributed to?
Good morning, YouTube. It is Alex Eldridge here, aka Oceanland, and it is time to make some synthwave.
It was a do-it-yourself thing, and they put it on MySpace, and there was like, you know, 1,000 people who were listening to it, but it was 1,000 influential people, or 1,000 people who were inspired, and it was almost like the Velvet Underground thing, where it's like, they sold 100 copies, but every one of those people started a band. When people today are like, oh, you know, I liked old synthwave better, which in and of itself sounds weird, they're thinking of that MySpace era, that do-it-yourself, Wild West, no holds barred, just let's do some synthy things and see what happens.
The thing that leads people who aren't into electronic music or synthwave, it seems to always be movies or TV shows. Isn't that strange? It's not like, I guess because it's the soundtrack, but it's strange that it's not like just the fashion or hearing it on the radio, because there's no radio anymore or anything like that. It's actually movies. It's kind of interesting. Something about Drive really kind of touched the nerve of a lot of people in the music from the film, yeah. 2011 was the tail end of post-punk, a lot of guitars and aggressive stuff. Before 2011, it wasn't cool to like neon colors or shiny pop music. You pair that with a character who goes around with a hammer smashing in people's heads, and I guess it is cool to like shiny pop music. You know what's weird, around that time, the thing that I think really helped launch the synthwave scene, around 2011 when Drive came out, that was the same time that Apple bundled in a bunch of soft synths with GarageBand, which shipped with all of their computers.
But today we're announcing something so cool. It's a fifth app that's going to be part of the iLife family, and its name is GarageBand.
Right out the box, GarageBand turns your Mac into dozens of musical instruments. All you got to do is plug in a USB musical keyboard like this lovely one I have before me.
So suddenly all these musicians, amateur musicians, professional musicians, everybody had a really accessible array of sounds like what you hear in Drive. If you look at the timeline in 2011, there was a big explosion of that kind of music being made, and I think that had something to do with it, just the ease of recording music as well as the accessibility to those sounds. If you were a young musician and you heard the music in Drive and you wanted to record something like that before 2011, you'd have to book some studio time, you'd have to buy some expensive gear. But after 2011, you could do it in your bedroom easily. and just have that same expensive, crisp sound. I think people find today's synthwave that sounds like old electronic music. I think they find it fresh because they never heard it before, that's all. It's probably just as simple as that. Something new. It's a new sound. For people like you and I who've heard it before, it's an old sound. It doesn't give it any less value. All music is like that. You know, back in the 80s, there were guys who were saying this sounds like it came from the 70s, this sounds like it came from the 50s. Things cycle, it's fine.
How do I spell Robert Parker? R-O-B-E-R-T-P-A-R-T.
D2. I think when it comes to nostalgia, the sound is of course important. I mean, not the synthesizer itself, but soundtrack-wise. I mean, what Vangelis did, what Brad Fiedel did for Terminator, and John Carpenter, those are really nostalgic. But the imagery is as much nostalgic, I think.
Yeah, I agree. If you look at the average fan, he was a man who was 35 years old and had quite a few memories from the 1980s. However, something has happened in the last few years. When you play live shows now, the audience is much more mixed. Both women and men, young guys and girls who have no memory of the 1980s, but they're very appealed by the sound.
Yeah.
You have a cyclic kind of thing with all trends, and the same is with the imagery, the sounds, and the inspiration you draw when you create something. And I mean, you always need to stand or build from something that's already existing when you're trying to build something new. I think from being very saturated in the 90s, it's been a little bit forgotten, and a lot of people sort of discover it. Sometimes for the second time and sometimes for the first time, because it's been sort of a forgotten source of inspiration.
We have our inspiration and we sound like other artists, but I think we still have our unique sounds.
Yeah.
And that's because where we came from, where we grew up, where the inspiration, what TV shows or movies did we see, what kind of musicians did we listen to, and I mean, we always create our own kind of sounds. Of course, we can say that this sounds like that or that, but I think in general and in the end there is a uniqueness of artists.
I didn't really have a label on what I was doing when I started out.
Just fiddling around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was first when I was contacted by Joakim Reime, the photographer, that he said, "Yeah, I'm doing a photo series of synthwave artists." Synthwave? Oh, okay, is that what I'm doing? Yeah. Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it doesn't really need to be labeled. I mean, it's not the important thing.
I don't know if any mainstream media know synthwave. They might know the sound, but I don't know if they know that that's the name of the style or the genre or whatever. And so I certainly don't know if they look up or down on us. So I really do not think about that stuff. And if someone writes a blog post about us or about another band or synthwave in general, that's just great. If they say it's shit, then there's lots of other music they can listen to. That's fine. There's music for everyone. last maybe 2 years, there's been this kind of new wave, or it's kind of bubbling in the more so in the pop culture, and I think that's awesome. I mean, I think it's funny to someone that doesn't know what synthwave is. When I try to explain what I do, we're a band, we make 80s music, and they go, oh, what kind? Because there's a lot of different 80s music, and I go, like, you've seen Stranger Things? Like, oh yeah, I love Stranger. Like, it's an instant like. Shadows in the city. I don't know if it's going to be one of those things where in a few years it's not cool and maybe it'll be a 90s aesthetic that comes through. It tends to come in waves. Not even talking about the music, but the people are hungry for nostalgia. We're hungry for movies like It and It Follows and Stranger Things. But, you know, palm trees and pelicans and skylines and sunsets on shirts and t-shirts and shorts and stuff is always going to be cool. It's timeless. Being involved in the synthwave scene it sounds so cheesy to go, it's changed my life, but it really has. I'm connecting with kindred spirits around the world that completely get it. When I post a song or a movie clip or whatever it is, what they are drawn to about it is the exact same things that I'm drawn to about the given thing. And that's kind of magic, because there's some guy in Germany might like it for the same reason that I do, and that's beautiful. Days of thunder, Jesus Christ! Without a dream, alive, God, fire,
The 80s were very special musically, in my opinion, because of the synthesizer and how much it was used. And it sounded like the future then. Those old songs still sound like the future to me now, because the synthesizer is so mechanical that it's never going to have like a dated sound like a folk guitar riff on an acoustic instrument. So yeah, I think the synthesizer is the reason everything from that decade, for me it personally, is special. I mean, the soundtracks, simple soundtracks on synthesizers were amazing, and it's just simply because of that instrument gaining popularity through, you know, Giorgio Moroder and all those clowns from the 70s. Goblin, I mean, people were focused on being more real. The record labels were signing decent fucking bands. The radio played good music. That's gone. How many people, you know, buy albums? How many people come to the shows? You know, there's people like Perturbator and Brute who are gonna draw like 1,000 or 1,500 in some places. And then, you know, there's smaller shows with like 50 people, and but they're happening everywhere and more all the time. So it's hard to really pin down the size, but it feels like around, like, and I hate to use this term because this is gonna sound like shit, but like early 90s emo. It feels like it's around there, or like maybe metalcore was in like 2000. You know what I mean? There's people coming, people care, but it's definitely not, you know, nobody's really getting rich off of it yet or anything, so.
I love listening to synthwave. I really do. I love listening to 80s, and yeah, it just makes me feel good, nostalgic. I mean, of course I have a personal connection to it, but it's still awesome. Even if I didn't have that personal connection to it, I think it'd still be awesome, just because personally I think all the sounds that you combine with it, you know, synth sounds, all the analog sounds that come with it, the drums, and it's epic usually, you know. It takes you on a journey, which some other maybe mainstream songs wouldn't do necessarily for me personally. It's beside the fact that it's just awesome music, I think. I think there shouldn't be any fear. I think we should embrace that it gets a little bit more mainstream. I think it will always be cool, because, I don't know, it's just cool. I don't think, I mean, I guess some synthwave producers, you know, that still hiding, are not showing their faces, and, you know, they want to tell a story, and perhaps they're a little bit scared of it. And I understand that, I get that. If it gets too mainstream, will it still be cool? You know, it's nice to have that kind of that family feel to it. It's nice to have that kind of, it's just us, you know, and you feel like it's just that kind of cloud and that bubble that you're in. But I think it's a positive thing. I think it's positive that it's getting more mainstream. Who knows if it will ever be super mainstream, like normal pop is nowadays, or R&B or whatever. We don't know that, but I think we should embrace it. We should definitely embrace people getting more into it and it being more a popular genre. And, you know, look at Netflix, you know, having Stranger Things, and just suddenly everyone is talking about it, and that's when they all Google, you know, synthwave artists and things like that. And, you know, we've got Riverdale. I think they're using quite a lot of synthwave music in the background for the soundtrack. You know, some people might not be responding so well that it's getting that big, but I personally think it's a really good thing. I want the whole world to know about synthwave. I want everyone to know about it because it's awesome, it's epic. I don't know who would not like it.
En España, con el synthwave, yo creo que es como aquel pueblo con la fibra óptica, ¿no? O sea, realmente acabará llegando, pero le va a costar más. Yo creo que con el synthwave está pasando lo mismo. O sea, ahora está entrando, que hay un interés, pero la gente tampoco no sabía bien de dónde venía, ¿no? Y entonces ahora sí que están viendo, pues se están conociendo a través de las páginas de Facebook o grupos como Carpenter Brut, ¿no? Que están girando a nivel mundial. Y creo que la gente está despertando un interés. Lo que pasa que, como pasa siempre con el dubstep aquí, cuando estaba sonando en Londres, aquí tardó años en llegar, y en Londres el dubstep sonaba por todos lados. Sí que es verdad que también influye mucho que en España hay pocos productores de synthwave. No hay tanta gente haciendo música, entonces si hay muchos productores, ellos mismos pueden crear una escena musical y arrastran a la gente. Es como una cadena. Si hay gente que se arrastra a esta música porque le interesa el movimiento, van a haber salas que van a programar. Si hay salas que programan, van a haber medios que van a hacer reseñas de discos, y es todo un engranaje, que es lo que es la industria musical, que es quizá lo que le falta un poco al synthwave en España. Yo creo que el synthwave sí que tiene, a nivel visual, tiene muchos clichés y muchos iconos, ¿no? Tiene desde los fondos en grid, como la película de Tron, desde estos degradados, ¿no? Y colores sobre todo en tonos lilas, esas ciudades, ¿no? Que se ven en el horizonte como de noche, con luces y carteles de neón muy Blade Runner. Entonces yo creo que la imagen gráfica en un proyecto musical creo que tiene un papel muy importante. Y antes de escuchar un disco, sin saber cómo va a sonar, lo primero que te entra es la portada. Entonces, si la portada a nivel gráfico puede seducirte o puede ya intentarte poner en una película que luego vas a estar tú escuchando de una forma más sonora, pues seguramente si tú tienes en iTunes diferentes portadas de diferentes artistas que tú no conoces, posiblemente el primero que escuches es el que la portada realmente te guste más. Yo reconozco que he comprado vinilos de grupos que no conocía por la portada. En Francia hay fiestas, en Inglaterra hay fiestas, en Estados Unidos hay fiestas, y es algo como que ya está, ya son unos pasos más asentados, ¿no? Un poco en el camino. Hay música electrónica que realmente está enfocada para el baile o para el club. El synthwave es una música que está enfocada también para que sea la banda sonora de tu propia vida. Entonces, el synthwave es un catalizador de la música nostálgica y de la estética visual de los 80 y del cine también. Yo he tenido la suerte por edad que he podido vivir esa época, pero yo estoy seguro que hay mucha gente que a través del synthwave, de escuchar esta música, gente mucho más joven, va a poder descubrir películas, ya sean de terror o de ciencia ficción como Robocop, que igual, si no hubiera sido por el synthwave, nunca hubiera sabido que hubieran existido.